"Wait for me at the airport, mother-in-law. We're going to surprise your son." Those were Tiffany's exact words. Words that made my heart flutter with hope after 3 years of painful distance from my only child. I stand now at Denver International Airport, surrounded by Christmas travelers embracing their loved ones, while I clutch gift bags worth thousands of dollars. The vintage Rolex that belonged to Harold, my late husband, restored at great expense for Philip. The sapphire earrings for Tiffany that I purchased from Tiffany & Co., a small fortune that seemed worth every penny for the chance to mend our relationship. And for my grandchildren, Bryce and Audrey, whom I've only seen in Facebook photos since they were toddlers, limited edition toys that I tracked down through collectors. It's 2:14 p.m. My flight from Boston landed nearly 2 hours ago. Tiffany had instructed me to wait at the main terminal exit where she'd pick me up. "Just wait there, and I'll find you," she'd said, sounding unusually warm. I've positioned myself perfectly where she should see me. I've even dressed carefully in the camel cashmere coat Philip once complimented years ago. My silver hair freshly styled before my early morning flight, despite the light Colorado snow that threatened to ruin it during my taxi ride from the gate. A family reunites just feet away from me, a young mother dropping to her knees to embrace her small son while her husband films the moment. Tears spring to my eyes. Will I finally get to hold 7-year-old Audrey and 9-year-old Bryce? The thought makes my hands tremble. "Nana!" a child shouts, and for a split second my heart leaps before I realize he's running toward an elderly woman 3 benches away. 3:45 p.m. I've called Tiffany 4 times, all sent straight to voicemail. I've texted, "I'm at the main terminal exit as you suggested. Did something come up?" No response. The Christmas decorations that initially seemed so cheerful now feel like they're mocking me. A massive wreath hangs above the exit doors, and "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas" plays for what must be the 10th time over the speakers. 4:38 p.m. A knot forms in my stomach as I recall the conversation with Tiffany. Did she specify a different meeting point? Had I misunderstood something? No. Her instructions were clear. "Wait for me at the airport. I'll find you when you land." I shift the heavy gift bags from one hand to the other. My lower back aches from sitting on these hard plastic seats. Outside, the snow falls heavier now, blanketing the runways. I watch as a ground crew deaces the wings of a departing plane. Announcements of delayed flights echo throughout the terminal. 5:52 p.m. I've now left 3 voicemails for Philip. "Your wife asked me to fly to Denver for a Christmas surprise for you, but I can't reach her. I've been waiting at the airport for hours. Please call me back." My mind travels back to Thanksgiving 3 years ago, the last time I saw them. The argument over Harold's estate, Philip's cold fury when I wouldn't sign over the lake house in New Hampshire, Tiffany's cutting remark, "It's not like you need all that property at your age," the way they left early, hustling my grandchildren away before I could properly say goodbye. But then came Tiffany's unexpected call last week, her voice warm, almost affectionate. "We should put the past behind us, especially at Christmas," she'd said. "Family is what matters most. Why don't you fly out to Denver and we'll surprise Philip." 7:23 p.m. The airport thins out as evening flights conclude. A janitor empties the trash can near me, giving me a curious look. This older woman still waiting, surrounded by gift bags. 8:14 p.m. A final desperate attempt. I call my old neighbor in Boston, Walter, who still keeps in touch with Philip's childhood friend, Sean. "I need their exact address in Colorado," I explain, my voice breaking. "They moved to Denver last summer and I need to reach them." Walter hesitates but promises to help. 30 minutes later, I have an address in Cherry Creek, an upscale neighborhood in Denver. 9:46 p.m. The taxi pulls up to an imposing craftsman-style home, windows glowing warm against the snowy night. Christmas music and laughter spill out onto the quiet street. With stiff legs and a pounding heart, I approach, gift bags dangling from my frozen fingers. I don't ring the doorbell. Something stops me, perhaps pride, perhaps fear. Instead, I step carefully through the fresh snow toward a large bay window, partially obscured by a towering Christmas tree dripping with ornaments. And there they are, My son, raising a wine glass in a toast. Tiffany, throwing her head back in laughter. My grandchildren, tearing open presents on the floor. And more, other family members, friends, all gathered around a magnificent dinner table laden with food. A dinner table with no empty seat for me. The truth crashes down like an avalanche. There was never going to be a surprise for Philip. The only surprise was for me. The cruel joke of an old woman flying across the country, waiting for hours at an airport on Christmas Eve, clutching gifts no one wanted, hoping for a reconciliation no one intended. A sob rises in my throat, but I swallow it down. Something shifts inside me, something hard and cold and determined. As I stand there in the snow, watching my family celebrate without me, a strange calm settles over me. I turn away from the window, careful not to be seen. The gift bags suddenly feel like what they are, dead weight, burdens I've carried too long. "Where to now, ma'am?" the taxi driver asks as I slide back into the warmth of his car. I take one last look at the house that has no place for me. "To a hotel," I say, with a newfound steel in my voice. And then tomorrow, I'm booking the first flight back to Boston to make some changes. The Westin downtown was the only decent hotel with availability on Christmas Eve. I barely noticed the elegant holiday decorations in the lobby as I checked in, my mind a storm of emotions. The desk clerk's pitying look as I arrived alone with no luggage, just gift bags, made my cheeks burn with humiliation. Sleep didn't come that night. I sat in the hotel armchair until dawn, the untouched gifts piled on the desk like evidence from a crime scene. Every minute that passed on the bedside digital clock seemed to mock me. Another moment wasted caring about people who didn't care about me. Another minute gone from the precious time I had left. By 6 a.m. on Christmas morning, I'd made my decision. I called the airline and booked the first available flight back to Boston, an expensive last-minute ticket departing at 11:30 a.m. Then I ordered room service, a full breakfast with coffee, eggs, bacon, and fresh fruit. If this was to be a turning point in my life, I wouldn't face it on an empty stomach. As I ate by the window overlooking the snow-covered Denver skyline, I mentally walked through my spacious Victorian home in Boston's Beacon Hill. The home where I'd raised Philip, the home he and Tiffany had repeatedly suggested I sell because "it's too much for you to maintain, Mom." I now saw those concerned comments for what they were, thinly veiled attempts to liquidate my most valuable asset. The morning light reflected off the fresh snow as I called my neighbor Doris. "Sylvia, Merry Christmas. Are you having a wonderful time with your family in Denver?" Her cheerful voice made my throat tighten. "Doris, I need a favor," I said, ignoring her question. "Would you mind picking me up from Logan Airport this afternoon? My flight gets in at 5:45. You're coming back today?" "But I thought—" "Things didn't work out as planned," I interrupted. "And Doris, could you recommend your financial advisor? Harold always handled everything, and it's time I took proper control." In the taxi to the airport, I left the gift bags on the back seat. "For your children," I told the surprised driver. No point in carrying dead weight any longer. The flight home was a blur. I kept my sunglasses on, staring out the window as America passed beneath me. I thought about all the Christmases I'd spent ensuring Philip's happiness, the carefully chosen gifts, the home-cooked meals, the traditions I'd created for our small family after Harold's unexpected death when Philip was just 16. I thought about how I'd supported Philip and Tiffany when they first married, the down payment for their first home, the interest-free loan for Philip's business venture, the countless hours of free babysitting when the children were small. And this was my repayment? To be deliberately humiliated? To be abandoned at an airport after flying across the country at their invitation? By the time the plane touched down in Boston, something had hardened inside me. The hurt was still there, but now it was encased in resolve. Doris was waiting as promised, her kind face concerned as I emerged from the terminal empty-handed. "Sylvia, what happened? Where are your things?" "I'll tell you on the drive home," I said. "But first, I need to know if your financial advisor would see me tomorrow. It's urgent." "On December 26th? I doubt it, but—" "I'll pay triple his usual rate," I interrupted, surprised by my own boldness. Doris raised her eyebrows but nodded. I'll call him when we get to your house. Back in my own home, I moved with purpose. I went straight to Harold's study, untouched since his passing 5 years ago. The leather-bound ledgers of our property investments lined the shelves, the small empire we'd built together, buying distressed properties during market downturns, renovating them with our own hands in the early years, and eventually managing a modest but profitable portfolio that had put Philip through the finest schools and universities. I unlocked Harold's desk drawer and pulled out the folder containing my will and financial documents. Everything was left to Philip. Everything. Even after the lake house argument, even after the years of growing distance, I had never changed it. Such was a mother's blind hope. I spent the next few hours going through every file, every account statement, every property deed. Harold had taught me the business in our early years together, before I stepped back to raise Philip. The knowledge was rusty, but still there. I discovered that Philip had convinced me to add him as a signatory to 2 of my accounts for emergency purposes last year. I found earnest letters from developers interested in the New Hampshire lake property, letters addressed to me that I'd never seen, now stuffed in a folder marked Mom Declined Offers. But the most revealing discovery came when I checked my emails. There, buried in my rarely used account, was a message from Tiffany to Philip that she'd accidentally copied me on 3 months ago. Your mom's financial advisor called again. We need to schedule that meeting before the end of the year if we want to start the transfer process for the lake house. She's becoming forgetful anyway. Did you notice she called Bryce by your name twice last time we visited? Might be time to discuss power of attorney options. I'd never seen this email. I rarely checked this account, and I'd called my grandson by my son's name because they shared the same cowlick in their hair, the same dimple when they smiled, not because I was forgetful. The pieces clicked together with cold clarity. The years of subtle suggestions about selling my home, the concerns about my ability to live independently, the questions about my will, all leading to yesterday's cruel airport abandonment. Perhaps a test to see if I was confused enough to wait for hours for a pickup that would never come? Doris called at 7 p.m. My advisor, James Kiernan, will see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. I told him it was important. Thank you, Doris, for everything. That night, I stood in front of my closet and pulled out my finest wool pantsuit, the one I'd worn to Harold's funeral. I laid it out for tomorrow, along with the coral lipstick Harold had always loved, the one I'd stopped wearing after his death. As I prepared for bed, I looked out my window at the Boston skyline, glittering with Christmas lights. Families were gathered inside those warm windows, opening gifts, sharing meals, making memories. I had given Philip everything, my youth, my energy, my unconditional love. I had put his needs before mine for decades. And how had he repaid me? With betrayal so profound it took my breath away. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, Sylvia Gardner would finally put herself first, and God help anyone who tried to stop me. The morning after Christmas dawned clear and cold in Boston. I dressed with deliberate care, charcoal pantsuit, silk blouse, pearls Harold had given me on our 20th anniversary, and a touch of coral lipstick. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Something had changed in my eyes overnight. A sharpness, a clarity that hadn't been there before. James Kiernan's office was in a renovated brownstone on Beacon Street. The young receptionist looked surprised to see anyone on the day after Christmas, but Mr. Kiernan himself greeted me warmly. Mrs. Gardner, please come in. Doris speaks highly of you. He was younger than I expected, perhaps mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and intelligent eyes behind rimless glasses. His office was understated but elegant, much like the man himself. I appreciate you seeing me on such short notice, especially during the holidays, I said, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. Your timing is actually perfect, he replied. The week between Christmas and New Year's is when I review annual portfolios. Now how can I help you? I placed my folder on his desk. I need to make significant changes to my financial arrangements. Immediately. Over the next 2 hours, I laid out my situation with a detachment that surprised even me. I showed him the property deeds, investment accounts, insurance policies, and the will that left everything to Philip. I explained how my son had gradually inserted himself into my financial affairs, while simultaneously suggesting I was becoming forgetful. I did not cry. I did not apologize. I simply stated facts. And yesterday, I concluded, I was deliberately stranded at Denver Airport after being invited to fly across the country for Christmas, only to discover my family celebrating without me. Kiernan's professional demeanor cracked slightly. Mrs. Gardner, I'm sorry for what you've experienced. Financially speaking, your situation is concerning. Adding your son as a signatory to these accounts has created vulnerability. Can it be undone? Absolutely. And more importantly, we need to create a comprehensive strategy to protect your assets. He leaned forward. If I may ask, what are your goals now? The question caught me off guard. For decades, my only goal had been to support Philip, to ensure his success, to leave him a legacy. I hesitated, the words unfamiliar on my tongue. I want to live my life for myself. I have another 15, maybe 20 good years left. I want them to be mine. Kiernan nodded, making notes. And the properties? The investments? I want to maintain control of everything. I may sell some properties, not because my son wants me to, but because I choose to. I want to travel. I want to renovate my home the way I've always dreamed. And I want to establish a trust for my grandchildren's education that cannot be accessed by their parents. What about your will? I took a deep breath. I want to change my will to establish a foundation in Harold's name. A small portion will go to Philip, enough to avoid a challenge, but not enough to fulfill whatever financial plans he and Tiffany have been making behind my back. By noon, we had a plan. Kiernan would immediately file paperwork to remove Philip as a signatory on my accounts. We would transfer assets to new accounts at different institutions. The lake house, the property Philip and Tiffany had been so eager to get their hands on, would be placed in a trust with specific conditions. I'll have preliminary documents for you to sign tomorrow, Kiernan said as he walked me to the door. And Mrs. Gardner, what you're doing takes courage. Courage. The word echoed in my mind as I walked through Boston's snow-dusted streets. Had I been a coward all these years? Had my devotion to my son blinded me to his manipulation? My phone rang. Philip's number. My heart lurched traitorously. I let it go to voicemail. Instead of returning home, I found myself walking toward Newbury Street. The post-Christmas sales were in full swing. Without quite planning it, I entered an upscale salon I'd passed countless times, but never entered. Do you have any openings today? I asked the receptionist, touching my sensible silver bob. 3 hours later, I emerged with a stylish, sophisticated cut that took years off my appearance. The silver was still there. I had no interest in hiding my age, but now it looked intentional, elegant rather than matronly. Next, I visited a boutique where a patient saleswoman helped me select several outfits that fit my newly awakened sense of self, clothing for the woman I was becoming, not the woman I'd allowed myself to fade into. My phone rang again as I was paying. Tiffany, this time. The audacity took my breath away. I declined the call. By the time I returned home, there were 6 missed calls, 3 from Philip, 3 from Tiffany, and several text messages. Mom, where are you? We're concerned. Sylvia, please call us. We're worried about you. Did you fly to Denver yesterday? There must have been a miscommunication. A miscommunication. As if I had somehow misheard Tiffany's explicit invitation to wait at the airport, as if I had hallucinated the entire exchange. I set the phone down without responding and turned instead to my email. There was a message from James Kiernan with attachments. He'd already drafted the paperwork to remove Philip from my accounts. The man worked quickly. There was also an email from a realtor I'd contacted years ago about potentially selling the lake house. I'd forgotten I still had her contact information. Dear Mrs. Gardner, she wrote, I hope this email finds you well. The market for lakefront properties in New Hampshire has increased significantly since we last spoke. If you're still considering selling, I'd be happy to provide a current valuation. I replied immediately, asking for an appointment the following week. Then I opened my calendar, empty as it had been for months, and began to fill it. Appointments with Kiernan, A meeting with Patricia Walsh, my estate attorney, a consultation with a contractor about the kitchen renovation I'd been postponing, a call to my doctor for the checkup I'd been avoiding. As evening fell, I made myself a proper dinner, something I rarely bothered with when dining alone, and opened a bottle of the expensive Bordeaux that Harold and I had collected. We'd always saved the good bottles for special occasions. How foolish that seemed now. I raised my glass to Harold's photograph on the mantel. "I think you'd approve," I told him. "I'm finally waking up." My phone rang again. "Philip." "This time," I answered. "Mom? Thank God. Where are you? We've been trying to reach you." His voice, the voice of my beloved son, sent a wave of emotion through me. For a moment, I almost weakened. "I'm at home in Boston," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Boston? But weren't you supposed to fly to Denver yesterday? Tiffany said there was a miscommunication about picking you up from the airport." The calculated lie ignited something in me. "A miscommunication," I repeated. "Is that what you're calling it now?" "What do you mean? Mom, are you feeling okay?" There it was, the subtle suggestion of confusion, of instability. How many times had he used this tactic? How had I never noticed? "I'm feeling remarkably clear, Philip, for the first time in years. Listen, we're sorry about the mix-up yesterday. Why don't you come out next weekend instead? We'll pay for your ticket." "There was no mix-up," I said quietly. "I waited at the Denver airport for 8 hours. I called both of you repeatedly, and then I took a taxi to your house and saw you all celebrating Christmas without me." Silence on the line. "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. You must be confused." "Stop!" My voice cut through his protestations like a blade. "I saw you, Philip. I saw all of you through the window. I stood in the snow and watched my family celebrate without me after deliberately stranding me at an airport." More silence then. "Mom, this doesn't sound like you. I'm worried. Have you been taking your medication?" I nearly laughed. I wasn't on any medication except for occasional ibuprofen. "You know what, Philip? You're right. This doesn't sound like me. The old me would have cried, would have begged for explanations, would have desperately tried to understand what I'd done wrong." I took a sip of my Bordeaux, savoring its rich complexity. "But I'm not that woman anymore," I continued. "Don't call me again until you're ready to tell the truth. About everything." I hung up before he could respond, my hand shaking, but my resolve firm. The phone immediately rang again. I switched it off and placed it in a drawer. Outside my window, the street lights illuminated gently falling snow. Boston looked like a postcard, peaceful and serene. Inside, I felt a storm raging, grief for what I'd lost, anger at the betrayal, but beneath it all, a growing sense of power. Tomorrow, I would begin reshaping my life. Tonight, I would allow myself to mourn the relationship I had thought I had with my son. I raised my glass once more to Harold's photograph. "To new beginnings," I whispered, "and to the woman I'm becoming." The days between Christmas and New Year's passed in a whirlwind of activity. I moved with purpose, with clarity, signing papers and making calls that would have seemed unthinkable just a week earlier. James Kiernan proved to be worth every penny of his substantial fees. By December 28th, Philip had been removed as a signatory from all my accounts. New accounts had been established at different institutions. Automatic transfers that had been sending $2,000 monthly to Philip's business account, transfers I had authorized years ago to help with cash flow, but had forgotten about, were stopped. "He's been calling our office," James informed me during our third meeting that week. "Quite insistent about speaking with me regarding your accounts." "And your response?" I asked, signing another document with my newly confident signature. "That I can only discuss a client's finances with the client herself." James permitted himself a small smile. He was displeased. I nodded, unsurprised. Philip had left me 17 voicemails and 32 text messages in the past 3 days, escalating from concern to frustration to thinly veiled threats. "Mom, call me back immediately. We're considering flying to Boston if you don't respond." This behavior is exactly why we've been worried about your decision-making. The last message had come this morning. We're meeting with our attorney today to discuss options for your care. This isn't right, Mom. Their attorney. As if I were an unruly child to be managed rather than a competent woman who had simply stopped playing by their rules. Patricia Walsh, my estate attorney, had been equally efficient. The revised will was already in draft form, drastically reducing Philip's inheritance and establishing the Harold Gardner Foundation for Women's Financial Independence, a cause that had grown increasingly meaningful to me. "What about your grandchildren?" Patricia had asked during our meeting yesterday. "Educational trusts," I replied without hesitation. "Accessible when they turn 18, provided they maintain a B average or better." And Patricia? "Make absolutely certain these trusts cannot be accessed by their parents under any circumstances." Today was December 30th, and I had an appointment that filled me with both anxiety and excitement. Christine Barnett, the realtor handling the potential sale of the lake house. We met at a cafe near my home, Christine arriving with a portfolio of comparable properties and recent sales figures. "Mrs. Gardner, I can't tell you how thrilled I am that you're considering selling. This property would generate significant interest, especially with the current demand for lakefront homes that can serve as both vacation properties and remote work locations." I sipped my cappuccino. Another small change, upgrading from my usual plain coffee. "What's your estimate?" Christine named a figure that made me blink. "That's considerably more than I expected. The market has changed dramatically since you last considered selling. Your property has 200 feet of lake frontage, the historic boathouse, and that magnificent great room with the stone fireplace. We'd list in early spring to capture buyers wanting to close before summer." As she spoke, memories flooded back. Harold teaching Philip to fish off the dock, 4th of July sparklers reflected in the still water, the sound of loons at dusk. The lake house had been our family sanctuary for decades, but it was also the property that had sparked the first major rift with Philip and Tiffany. They'd wanted me to sign it over to them 3 years ago, claiming they would maintain it for the family, while suggesting I was no longer able to handle the responsibility. "I'd like to schedule a walkthrough next week," I said decisively, "and I want to discuss staging options." After Christine left, I walked through Boston Common, watching families enjoying the snow, children sledding down the gentle slopes. A pang of longing for my grandchildren hit me unexpectedly. Bryce and Audrey were innocent in all this. Whatever game their parents were playing, the children were merely pawns, just as I had been. My phone vibrated with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Gardner, this is Lawrence Shapiro, attorney representing your son, Philip, and his wife, Tiffany. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to discuss matters pertaining to your well-being." The sheer presumption took my breath away. I deleted the message without responding. Back home, I made another decision. I called Marjorie Winters, my closest friend from the years before I'd gradually isolated myself at Philip and Tiffany's subtle urging. "Sylvia Gardner? Is that really you?" Marjorie's voice was exactly as I remembered. Warm, slightly raspy from years of laughter. "It's me, Marge. I know it's been too long. 3 years, 2 months, and approximately 17 days, she replied. "But who's counting?" I laughed, then sobered. "I owe you an apology for disappearing after Philip and that wife of his convinced you I was taking advantage of your generosity by accepting rides to my chemo treatments. Water under the bridge, darling." My throat tightened. I was a fool. You were a mother who couldn't bear to think her son might be manipulative. Different thing entirely. Marjorie paused. "So what's changed?" I told her everything. The airport, the Christmas celebration I'd witnessed through the window, the financial discoveries, my plan moving forward. Well, she said when I finished. Sylvia Gardner finally grew a spine. I always knew it was in there somewhere. "I need your advice, Marge. You went through something similar with your daughter-in-law years ago." "Indeed I did. And I'll tell you the same thing my therapist told me. You're not responsible for their choices, only for your response to them." Therapist, best decision I ever made. Dr. Eleanor Schaefer. She specializes in family estrangement and elder empowerment. I'll text you her number. When we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in days. I immediately called Dr. Schaefer's office and scheduled an appointment for the following week. That evening, I did something I'd been putting off. I went through my photo albums, images of Philip as a baby, a toddler, a gap-toothed elementary schooler, a sullen teenager, a proud college graduate, photos of family Christmases, birthdays, vacations. The day he married Tiffany, how handsome he'd looked, how I'd cried with happiness. And then gradually, fewer photos. Holidays where they were too busy to visit, birthdays celebrated via brief phone calls, the grandchildren I barely knew. I selected one photo, Philip at age 7, sitting on Harold's shoulders at the lake house, both of them beaming with identical smiles, and placed it on my bedside table. The rest, I packed away in a box that I carried to the attic. My phone rang just as I descended the attic stairs. Tiffany's number. I hesitated, then answered. Sylvia? Thank God. We've been so worried. Her voice sounded strained, lacking its usual confident edge. Have you? I kept my tone neutral. Of course. When you didn't respond to our calls, and then we found out you've been making all these financial changes. Philip is beside himself. I sat down on the top step, suddenly tired. What do you want, Tiffany? We want to help you, she said, her voice taking on that patient tone one might use with a confused child. We know you've been through a shock, and sometimes that can lead to impulsive decisions. A shock, I repeated. You mean like being told to wait at an airport for hours for a pickup that was never intended to come? A pause. Sylvia, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Stop. I cut her off firmly. I was there, Tiffany. I saw you all through the window celebrating without me, after you specifically invited me to Denver. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, hardened. Philip said you'd become paranoid, but I had no idea how bad it had gotten. The calculated cruelty of their strategy suddenly became crystal clear. They were attempting to gaslight me, to make me doubt my own experience, my own sanity. If they could establish that I was confused or paranoid, they could potentially challenge any financial changes I'd made. I recorded our phone conversation, Tiffany. I lied smoothly. The one where you invited me to Denver. I've shared it with my attorney. Silence. Now, if there's nothing else, I have plans this evening. This isn't over, Sylvia, she said, her saccharine concern evaporating entirely. Philip is devastated by your behavior. We're exploring all options. As am I replied calmly. Goodbye, Tiffany. I hung up, my heart pounding, but my resolve stronger than ever. I hadn't actually recorded our conversation, but her reaction told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't even attempted to deny it once she thought evidence existed. I descended the remaining stairs slowly, feeling the weight of decades of manipulation falling away with each step. In my bedroom, I caught sight of myself in the full-length mirror, the stylish new haircut, the posture that had straightened from defeated slump to dignified strength, the clear eyes that no longer avoided their own reflection. Happy New Year, Sylvia, I whispered to myself. This one belongs to you. New Year's Eve arrived with a fresh snowfall that blanketed Boston in pristine white. I spent the morning with James Kiernan, finalizing the last of my financial restructuring. The clarity of seeing my assets properly organized, spreadsheets detailing properties, investments, accounts, gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. Everything's in order now, James said, handing me a leather portfolio containing copies of all documents. You're fully protected. Thank you, I replied, then hesitated. What happens when they realize what I've done? James's expression turned serious. They'll be angry. They might threaten legal action. But we've done everything by the book. You're of sound mind, and these assets are yours to control. As I stepped outside his office into the bright winter morning, my phone rang. Philip. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. Mom? We're at Logan Airport. We flew in this morning. My heart stuttered. You're in Boston? Yes. We need to talk face to face. Tiffany's with me. I gripped the phone tighter, steadying myself against a wave of anxiety. This was sooner than I'd anticipated, but perhaps inevitable. I see, I said, keeping my voice level. And where are Bryce and Audrey? A pause. They're with Tiffany's parents. Mom, where are you? We'll come to you. Decision time. I could postpone this confrontation, but to what end? Better to face them now, with my newfound strength fresh and my documentation in hand. I'll meet you at the house in an hour. I took a taxi home, using the ride to center myself. I reviewed the facts. I had done nothing wrong. I had simply taken control of what was rightfully mine. I was not confused, paranoid, or unstable. I was a woman who had finally recognized manipulation for what it was. At home, I made deliberate preparations. I set out coffee and the almond cookies Philip had always loved as a child, a reminder of the mother I had been. I placed James Kiernan's business card on the coffee table alongside Patricia Walsh's. I positioned my chair at the head of the table rather than in my usual place on the side. The doorbell rang at exactly noon. Through the window, I saw them, Philip in his expensive camel coat, Tiffany in a fur-trimmed parka, both wearing expressions of grim determination. I opened the door, standing tall in my new charcoal pantsuit and heels. Hello, Philip. Tiffany. I gestured them inside, noting their momentary surprise at my appearance. Please, come in. They exchanged glances as they entered, clearly thrown off balance by my calm demeanor and transformed appearance. Mom? Philip began as soon as we were seated in the living room. We're very concerned about your recent behavior. I sipped my coffee, waiting. The bizarre accusations about Christmas Eve, Tiffany added, her voice honeyed with false concern. The sudden financial changes, your erratic communication. We've consulted with a geriatric specialist, Philip continued. These can be signs of cognitive decline. We're here to help. I set my cup down carefully. How thoughtful, and how convenient that my supposed cognitive decline began just as you were attempting to gain control of my assets. Philip flushed. That's absurd. Is it? I opened the leather portfolio James had given me and extracted a printed email. This is a message Tiffany accidentally copied me on 3 months ago, discussing how you plan to use my forgetfulness to facilitate the transfer of the lake house. Tiffany's face went white. Philip glanced at her sharply. And here, I continued, removing another document, is a statement showing monthly transfers of $2,000 to your business account. Transfers you set up after convincing me to add you as a signatory for emergencies only. Mom, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You've always been very convincing, Philip. I closed the portfolio. But explanations aren't necessary. I've made my decisions. What decisions? Tiffany asked, her false warmth evaporating. I've removed Philip as a signatory on all accounts. I've established educational trusts for Bryce and Audrey that cannot be accessed by either of you. I've revised my will substantially, and I'm selling the lake house. You can't do that, Tiffany exclaimed. I can, and I have. I looked directly at my son, whose face had gone rigid with shock. The lake house will be listed next week. Philip leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. Mom, if you're doing this to punish us for some imagined slight, I waited 8 hours at Denver Airport, Philip. I called you both repeatedly. I took a taxi to your home and saw you all celebrating Christmas without me. That is not imagined. You're confused. Stop. My voice cut through the room like a blade. I am not confused. I am not unstable. I am not experiencing cognitive decline. I am simply no longer willing to be manipulated. The silence that followed was deafening. Tiffany recovered first. We'll challenge this legally. You're clearly not in your right mind. I smiled thinly. My physicians, financial advisor, and attorney would disagree, but you're welcome to try. Philip stood abruptly. This isn't you, Mom. This isn't the mother I know. You're right, I said softly. The mother you knew would have continued to make excuses for your behavior, would have blamed herself, would have begged for crumbs of your attention. She's gone. As they left, slamming the door behind them, I remained seated, my hands steady, my breathing calm. The confrontation I had dreaded was over, and I had emerged not broken, but stronger. January in Boston brought bitter cold and early darkness, but inside my home, I felt a growing warmth. Each day brought new discoveries, not just about my finances, but about myself. Dr. Eleanor Schaefer's office was nothing like I'd imagined. Instead of the clinical setting I'd expected, her practice occupied a converted Victorian townhouse with comfortable chairs, warm lighting, and walls lined with books. "Mrs. Gardner," she greeted me, a woman perhaps my age with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. "Or may I call you Sylvia?" "Sylvia, please. Marjorie speaks highly of you. She says you're reclaiming your life." I smiled, feeling an unexpected surge of emotion. "I'm trying. Some days are harder than others." Over the next hour, I shared my story, the years of subtle manipulation, the Christmas Eve humiliation, the confrontation with Philip and Tiffany. Dr. Schaefer listened attentively, occasionally asking questions that cut straight to the heart of matters I hadn't fully examined. "What do you want now, Sylvia?" she asked as our session neared its end. "Not what you don't want, what you do want." I considered the question carefully. "I want to live authentically. I want to stop feeling guilty for taking up space in the world. I want to find purpose beyond being Philip's mother." "Good," she nodded. "Now, what about your grandchildren?" The question caught me off guard. "Bryce and Audrey? They're innocent in all this. I've set up educational trusts for them. But do you want a relationship with them?" "Of course, but Philip and Tiffany control access. After our confrontation, I doubt they'll allow me to see the children." Dr. Schaefer leaned forward. "That's a practical obstacle, yes. But first, I want to explore whether maintaining that connection is important to you, regardless of how difficult it might be." By the time I left her office, I had homework, to write a letter to each of my grandchildren, not to send, just to clarify my own feelings and intentions toward them. The following day brought a different kind of revelation. Christine Barnett, the realtor, had conducted a thorough inspection of the lake house and discovered something disturbing. "Mrs. Gardner," she said over the phone, her voice concerned, "were you aware that someone has been using your property? There are signs of recent occupancy, food in the refrigerator, personal items in the closets." My grip on the phone tightened. "That's impossible. The house has been closed for winter. No one has permission to be there." "Well, someone certainly has been there, quite regularly from the looks of it." I took photos. Within minutes, the images appeared in my email. Beer bottles on the counter, unfamiliar clothes in the master bedroom, a gaming console connected to the television, and most telling, a framed photo of Philip, Tiffany, and the children on the mantel. They had been using my house, the house they claimed I was unable to maintain, as their personal vacation property without my knowledge or permission. The discovery should have infuriated me, but instead, I felt an odd sense of relief. Here was tangible proof of their deception, not something they could dismiss as my confusion or paranoia. I forwarded the photos to James Kiernan and Patricia Walsh with a brief message. "For our records, additional evidence of unauthorized use of my property." Then I called the locksmith recommended by Christine and arranged for all locks at the lake house to be changed immediately. That evening, Doris invited me to dinner with a small group of her friends, all women around my age, most widowed or divorced, all vibrant and engaged with life in ways I had forgotten were possible. "Sylvia, you must tell Elaine about your financial advisor," Doris urged as we enjoyed dessert. "She's been letting her son-in-law manage her investments, and it's a disaster." Elaine, a stylish woman in her 70s, sighed. "I'm afraid to look at the statements. Bernard, my son-in-law, keeps saying I wouldn't understand the sophisticated strategy he's employing." The familiar pattern sent a chill through me. "Elaine, would you like James Kiernan's number? He specializes in helping women take control of their finances." As we exchanged contact information, an idea began forming in my mind. How many other women my age were in similar situations? How many had surrendered their financial autonomy to adult children or in-laws who claimed greater expertise or understanding? Later that night, I began writing in a journal Dr. Schaefer had suggested I keep. I wrote about the lake house discovery, about Elaine's situation, about the growing clarity I felt despite the continuing pain of Philip's betrayal. On the final page, I sketched out the beginning of a plan for the Harold Gardner Foundation, not just a recipient of my estate, but an active organization dedicated to helping older women achieve financial independence and literacy. My phone chimed with a text message just as I was closing the journal. From Philip. Changed the locks at the lake house? Really, Mom? This has gone far enough. I responded simply, we'll discuss unauthorized use of my property through our respective attorneys. Then I turned off my phone, wrapped myself in the cashmere throw I'd purchased as a gift to myself, and watched the snow fall gently outside my window. For the first time in decades, I was living life on my own terms. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Philip's text confirmed that he wasn't giving up, but I was no longer walking it in the dark. I wish you could see me now, Harold, I whispered to the empty room. I think you'd be proud. Mid-January brought a thaw, both in the weather and in my isolation. Marjorie had reintroduced me to our old social circle, women who welcomed me back with a warmth that made me realize how much I'd missed genuine friendship. Sylvia, you remember Catherine Bradley? Marjorie said during our lunch at a charming bistro near the public garden. She's running that financial literacy program for women I told you about. Catherine, elegant in her 60s with a crown of white curls, reached across the table to clasp my hand. Marjorie mentioned you're establishing a foundation. I'd love to hear more. As I described my vision for the Harold Gardner Foundation, Catherine nodded with increasing enthusiasm. This aligns perfectly with our work, she said. We focus on women over 50 who suddenly find themselves managing finances after divorce or widowhood, but we've noticed a disturbing pattern of adult children undermining their mother's financial confidence. Exactly what happened to me, I acknowledged. I knew better. Harold taught me everything about our business, but somehow I still surrendered control to my son. The emotional manipulation is insidious, Catherine said. Would you consider speaking at our next workshop? Your story could help others recognize the warning signs. The idea of sharing my experience publicly was terrifying and exhilarating. I'd be honored. That afternoon, I had my weekly meeting with James Kiernan. The financial restructuring was complete, all accounts secured, all documentation in order. There's one more thing we should discuss, James said, his expression unusually grave. I've been reviewing the tax documents for your rental properties from the past 3 years, and something doesn't add up. He slid a folder across his desk. Inside were spreadsheets comparing reported rental income with market rates for comparable properties. Your properties consistently show rental income significantly below market value, he explained. For instance, your brownstone in Back Bay should generate approximately $5,200 monthly, but it's reported at $3,800. I frowned. That can't be right. I've owned that building for 20 years. The tenants are long-term, but we've always adjusted rents to stay near market value. Have you been directly receiving the rental checks? The question hit me like a blow. No, I admitted. Philip suggested consolidating everything through his property management company after Harold died. For simplicity, James's expression confirmed my growing suspicion. I believe we need to audit all your properties. It appears your son's company may have been reporting lower rental incomes to you than what tenants were actually paying. My hands trembled slightly as I closed the folder. You're suggesting he's been skimming from my rental income for years. I'm suggesting we need more information. Would you authorize me to hire a forensic accountant? I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was potential fraud. Do it. That evening, I received an unexpected email from Tiffany's mother, Eleanor, whom I'd met only a handful of times at family events. Dear Sylvia, she wrote, I feel uncomfortable reaching out behind my daughter's back, but I'm concerned about Bryce and Audrey. They keep asking why they can't see their grandmother anymore. Tiffany told them you're not feeling well, but they sense something is wrong. I thought you should know they miss you. Attached was a recent photo of my grandchildren building a snowman, their faces rosy with cold and laughter. Tears sprang to my eyes. These children, the innocent victims in all this, still remembered me, still asked for me. I composed a careful reply. Thank you, Eleanor. I miss them terribly. I'm perfectly well, despite what Tiffany may have told them. If there's ever an opportunity for you to facilitate contact, I would be deeply grateful. The next morning brought a response I hadn't expected. The children will be with me this Saturday while Philip and Tiffany attend a charity gala. Would you consider visiting? I could arrange for us to accidentally meet at the Boston Children's Museum. My heart raced at the prospect of seeing my grandchildren. Was this a trap? Or was Eleanor genuinely concerned about the children's well-being? I called Dr. Schaefer for guidance. It's natural to be suspicious, she said after I explained the situation. Your trust has been deeply violated, but ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? It could be a setup, I replied, a way to prove I'm interfering or unstable. And the best that could happen? I could see my grandchildren. They would know I haven't abandoned them. Dr. Schaefer was silent for a moment. Healing isn't just about protecting yourself from further harm, Sylvia. It's also about reclaiming what matters to you, on your terms. I made my decision. I would meet Eleanor and the children, but on my terms, with safeguards in place. I texted Marjorie. Would you accompany me to the Children's Museum on Saturday? I could use a witness. Then I replied to Eleanor. I would love to see the children. Shall we meet at the Bubble exhibit at 2 p.m.? I'll have a friend with me. On Friday, the forensic accountant James had hired delivered his preliminary findings. They were worse than I'd imagined. Over the past 5 years, Philip's management company had systematically underreported rental incomes by approximately $350,000, money that had never reached my accounts. We have enough evidence to pursue legal action, James advised. Fraud charges would be justified. I stared at the numbers, each figure a betrayal from the son I had trusted implicitly. The son I had sacrificed for. The son who had deliberately stranded me at an airport on Christmas Eve. Let me think about it, I said finally. There are my grandchildren to consider. That night, I stood at my bedroom window, watching snow begin to fall again over Boston. Tomorrow I would see Bryce and Audrey for the first time in years. Tomorrow I would take another step in reclaiming my life. But tonight, I allowed myself to grieve, not just for the son I had lost, but for the woman I had allowed myself to become. Never again, I whispered to my reflection in the darkened glass. Never again. Saturday dawned clear and cold, the city transformed by fresh snow that sparkled under brilliant sunshine. I dressed with special care, a cashmere sweater in a soft blue that Harold always said matched my eyes, comfortable slacks, and a silver pendant that had been a gift from Philip many Christmases ago. Some connections, I was learning, could be honored even as boundaries were established. Marjorie picked me up at noon, her practical SUV navigating Boston's slippery streets with confidence. Nervous? She asked, glancing at my tightly clasped hands. Terrified, I admitted. What if they don't remember me? What if they've been told things about me? What if this is some kind of trap? That's why I'm coming along, Marjorie said firmly. No one's going to manipulate you on my watch. We arrived at the Boston Children's Museum early, giving us time to settle in and observe. The place was busy with weekend visitors, families taking advantage of the winter day to explore indoor activities. We purchased tickets and made our way to the Bubble exhibit, where giant soap films and spheres delighted squealing children. Remember when we brought the boys here? Marjorie asked, referring to our sons who had been childhood friends. Philip was always so methodical, trying to create the perfect bubble. The memory brought an unexpected smile. He wanted to understand the science behind everything. Harold encouraged that curiosity. At precisely 2 p.m., Eleanor appeared at the entrance to the exhibit, holding the hands of 2 children whose faces I recognized instantly, despite the years that had passed. Bryce, now nearly 10, had grown tall and lanky, his father's features becoming more pronounced. 7-year-old Audrey remained petite, with a halo of blonde curls framing her face. My heart constricted at the sight of them. These were my grandchildren, my blood, my legacy, yet they were nearly strangers to me. Eleanor spotted me and gave a slight nod. She bent down to speak to the children, then pointed in my direction. Bryce's expression remained guarded, but Audrey's face lit up with recognition. "Grandma Sylvia!" she shouted, breaking free from Eleanor's grasp and running toward me. I knelt down just in time to catch her in a fierce hug, the scent of her strawberry shampoo bringing tears to my eyes. "Audrey, my sweet girl, you've gotten so big." Bryce approached more cautiously, stopping a few feet away. "Hi, Grandma." "Hello, Bryce," I said, extending one hand while keeping the other around Audrey. "I've missed you very much." He studied me for a moment, then stepped forward to accept a brief hug. "Mom said you were sick. Are you better now?" The simple question revealed so much about what they'd been told. "I was never sick, sweetheart. There's been a misunderstanding between your parents and me, but that has nothing to do with how much I love you both." Eleanor joined us, her expression apologetic. "They've been asking about you for weeks. I couldn't bear to see them so confused." "Thank you," I said sincerely. "This means more than you know." Marjorie suggested we explore the museum together, a neutral activity that would allow natural interaction. For the next 2 hours, we moved through exhibits on science, culture, and art. Gradually, the children relaxed, sharing stories of school and friends, asking questions about my life. "Do you still have the big house with the lake?" Bryce asked as we watched Audrey climb through a multi-level structure. "Yes, I do. Dad takes us there sometimes," he continued. "He says it will be ours someday." I exchanged glances with Marjorie, keeping my expression neutral. "The lake house has been in our family for a long time. I have many happy memories there. Can we visit you sometime?" Audrey asked, rejoining us. "Mom says you live too far away, but Grandma Eleanor says you're right here in Boston." "I would love that more than anything," I replied carefully, "but it would need to be something your parents agree to." Eleanor, who had been giving us space, approached with a concerned expression. "We should wrap up soon. Tiffany expects me to have the children back by 5. As we prepared to say goodbye, I retrieved 2 small packages from my purse, books I had selected carefully for each child. For Bryce, a beautifully illustrated atlas that acknowledged his curiosity about the world. For Audrey, a collection of fairy tales featuring resourceful heroines. "These are from your grandfather and me," I said, using the present tense deliberately. "He would be so proud of you both." Audrey hugged me fiercely. "Will we see you again soon?" "I hope so, sweetheart. I'm always here, even when you can't see me." As they walked away with Eleanor, Bryce turned back once, raising his hand in a solemn wave that broke my heart and healed it simultaneously. "Well done," Marjorie said softly beside me. "You gave them truth without burden." Back in the car, emotion finally overwhelmed me. I sobbed. For the lost years, for the relationships damaged by adult conflicts, for the grandchildren caught in the middle. "What now?" Marjorie asked when my tears subsided. "Now I make some difficult decisions," I replied, thinking of the forensic accountant's report sitting on my desk at home. "Decisions that will affect all our futures." That evening, I received a text from Eleanor. "The children haven't stopped talking about seeing you. Audrey is sleeping with her book under her pillow. Bryce asked if you're coming to his birthday next month. I haven't mentioned our meeting to Tiffany yet." I wrote back, "Thank you for today. It meant everything." Then, I called James Kiernan. "I've made a decision about the fraud evidence," I told him. "I want to proceed, but with conditions. First, I want a formal letter sent to Philip detailing our findings and offering one chance to make restitution before legal action begins. Second, I want to ensure any proceedings remain private for now, for my grandchildren's sake." "I understand," James replied. "I'll draft the letter Monday morning." After we hung up, I sat in my study, surrounded by the evidence of my son's betrayal, and wrote in my journal, "Today, I held my grandchildren. Today I glimpsed a future where healing might be possible. Today I accepted that love and accountability can coexist. The path forward is neither forgiveness without consequence nor punishment without compassion. It is truth, clearly seen and firmly addressed. It is boundaries, lovingly established and consistently maintained. It is the wisdom to know that some bridges, once burned, can be rebuilt, but they will never be the same bridges they once were." The certified letter was delivered to Philip on a Tuesday morning in early February. James Kiernan had crafted it masterfully, formal but not threatening, detailed but not accusatory, outlining the discrepancies discovered in the rental income and offering a structured repayment plan rather than immediate legal action. "He'll receive it today," James confirmed by phone. "Be prepared for his response." I spent the morning at Catherine Bradley's financial literacy workshop, sharing my story with a room full of women whose attentive faces reflected recognition, concern, and determination. Many approached me afterward, some with tears in their eyes, others with jaws set in newfound resolve. "You've just described my relationship with my daughter," one woman whispered. "I thought I was alone." "How did you find the courage?" asked another. I answered honestly, "When the pain of remaining the same became greater than the fear of change." By afternoon, I was emotionally drained, but filled with purpose. The Harold Gardner Foundation was taking shape in my mind, not just as a future legacy, but as an immediate mission. Catherine and I had scheduled a follow-up meeting to discuss collaboration between our organizations. I returned home to find Philip waiting on my doorstep. My heart hammered as I approached, keys in hand. He looked haggard, his normally immaculate appearance rumpled, dark circles beneath his eyes. "We need to talk," he said simply. I unlocked the door, maintaining the calm I'd practiced with Dr. Schaefer. "Come in." In the kitchen, neutral territory, not the formal living room where our last confrontation had occurred, I put on the kettle. Some habits of hospitality remained ingrained, despite everything. Philip placed the letter on the counter, its legal letterhead stark against the granite. "Is this how it ends between us? With lawyers and accusations?" I measured tea leaves carefully into the pot. "This isn't about endings, Philip. It's about truth." "Truth?" His laugh was hollow. "The truth is that I've been managing your properties for years, handling problems you never even had to think about. Yes, I took a management fee. It was deserved." I turned to face him, my voice steady. "A management fee would have been appropriate, if disclosed and agreed upon. What you did was systematically skim over $300,000 by reporting lower rents than tenants were actually paying." He flinched, the direct statement cutting through his justifications. "I needed the capital for investments. I was going to pay it back. It was a temporary arrangement. For 5 years?" The kettle whistled. I poured water over the tea leaves, the familiar ritual steadying my hands. "What do you want, Mom? Money? I'll pay it back. An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. But this vendetta, changing your will, selling the lake house, cutting us off, it's destroying our family." I set a cup before him, then took my own to the opposite side of the island. "Our family was already broken, Philip. I just refused to see it. Because of one misunderstanding at Christmas? You're overreacting." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I interrupted quietly. "Tiffany deliberately invited me to Denver, then abandoned me at the airport. You celebrated Christmas without me, knowing I was waiting there alone for hours. When I discovered the truth, instead of admitting what you'd done, you tried to convince me I was confused, even mentally unstable." His eyes slid away from mine. "Tiffany thought." "I don't care what Tiffany thought. I care what you did. My son, the person I trusted most in this world." Silence stretched between us, filled with decades of complicated history. The little boy I'd raised, the man who had betrayed me. Finally, Philip spoke, his voice smaller than I'd heard it since childhood. "What happens now? Legal action? Public humiliation? That depends on you," I replied. "The letter outlines a repayment schedule for the misappropriated funds. If you comply, this remains private, and if I don't, then I'll have no choice but to pursue fraud charges." I don't want that, Philip. Not for my sake, and certainly not for Bryce and Audrey's. At the mention of his children, something shifted in his expression. "You saw them? Last weekend. They're beautiful, intelligent, wonderful children who deserve to know their grandmother." He stared into his untouched tea. "Tiffany won't like it. This isn't about what Tiffany likes. This is about what's right." Another long silence. Then, unexpectedly, Philip's shoulders began to shake. To my astonishment, my 43-year-old son was crying. Not the manipulative tears I'd grown wary of, but deep, genuine sobs that seemed to emerge from some long-buried place. "I don't know how it got this far," he managed between breaths. After Dad died, everything changed. The pressure to succeed, to provide like he did. Tiffany always wanted more. Bigger house, private schools, vacations, status. I kept thinking if I just had enough capital, I could make investments that would solve everything. I remained silent, letting him speak. I started small, just a little from the rental income, money you wouldn't miss. Then it became easier, necessary, justified. He looked up, his face ravaged with shame. The Christmas thing was Tiffany's idea. She said if you seemed unstable, we could petition for control of your finances. I knew it was wrong, but by then, we were so deep in debt despite the money I was taking. Debt? This was new information. What kind of debt? Mortgages, credit cards, loans. The lifestyle we've been living, it's all smoke and mirrors. The Denver house is underwater. Tiffany's spending is out of control. The revelation stunned me. All this time I'd imagined them wealthy and secure, looking to add my assets to their abundance. Instead, they'd been drowning, grasping at my resources as a lifeline. Does Tiffany know about the letter? About our meeting? Philip shook his head. Not yet. I came straight here when I received it. I took a deep breath, weighing decades of motherhood against recent betrayal, balancing justice with compassion. Here's what's going to happen, I said finally. You will sign the repayment agreement. You will seek financial counseling. James can recommend someone. You will ensure I have regular contact with my grandchildren, and you will tell me the complete truth, always, from this moment forward. And in return? In return, we begin rebuilding what's been broken. Not the same as before. That's impossible. But something new, based on honesty and respect. Philip looked at me for a long moment, seeing perhaps for the first time not just his mother but a woman of strength and dignity. I don't deserve your forgiveness. This isn't about what you deserve, I replied. It's about what I choose. Spring came early to Boston that year. By mid-March, crocuses had pushed through the last patches of snow in my garden, their purple and yellow blossoms defiantly cheerful against the melting white backdrop. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee cup warming my hands, watching as a cardinal landed briefly on the bird feeder I'd installed last week. Another small change in a season defined by transformation. Like those determined flowers breaking through frozen ground, I too had emerged from a dark season changed, not unscathed, but alive and growing in unexpected ways. The formal repayment agreement with Philip had been executed the week after our tearful kitchen confrontation. James Kiernan had structured it meticulously. Monthly transfers to restore the misappropriated rental income, a reasonable interest rate, and explicit consequences for default. Each month since, the transfer had appeared in my account right on schedule, a tangible acknowledgement of past wrongs and commitment to restitution. More valuable than the money was the transparency that now existed between us. Our weekly meetings, initially conducted in James's office with the awkward formality of estranged business associates, had gradually moved to a quiet corner table at a cafe halfway between our homes. The conversations, though still careful, had begun to contain fragments of genuine connection, moments where I glimpsed the son I had raised beneath the man who had betrayed me. Dad would be ashamed of what I did, Philip had said during our meeting yesterday, staring into his coffee cup rather than meeting my eyes. Yes, I'd replied honestly, but he would be proud of your effort to make it right. Tiffany's reaction to the revelations had been predictably volatile. According to Philip, she had cycled through rage, denial, and threats of divorce when confronted with the evidence of their deception. She had eventually retreated into sullen acceptance when faced with the potential legal and social consequences of fighting the agreement. She feels humiliated, Philip explained during one of our meetings, not just by the financial situation, but by having to admit that what we did to you at Christmas was calculated and cruel. And how do you feel? I had asked, genuinely curious about his perspective now that weeks had passed. He had looked out the cafe window for a long moment before answering. Like I lost my way so gradually, I didn't notice until I was completely in the dark. And then, when given the chance to step back into the light, on Christmas Eve when you were waiting at that airport, I chose the darkness again. Such moments of clarity gave me hope, though I maintained the boundaries Dr. Schaefer had helped me establish. Trust, once shattered, could not be instantly restored through apologies alone, no matter how sincere. But the true joy of spring, the proof that renewal was possible, came through my grandchildren. What began as those accidental meetings orchestrated by Eleanor had evolved into regular Sunday afternoon visits, reluctantly sanctioned by their parents. Today would mark our 6th consecutive weekend together, a pattern that had quickly become the highlight of my week. I heard the car in the driveway and moved to the front door, opening it just as Eleanor was helping the children from her sedan. "Grandma!" Audrey's voice rang clear in the spring air as she broke free from her grandmother's hand and raced up the walkway, her 7-year-old legs pumping with enthusiasm. She threw herself into my arms with complete trust, smelling of sunshine and strawberry shampoo. Bryce followed more sedately, approaching 10 and increasingly aware of his dignity. He offered a more restrained greeting, though I didn't miss how his eyes lit up at the sight of the telescope now permanently set up in the bay window of the living room. "Saturn's rings are visible this month," I said, noting his interest. "I thought we might do some stargazing later if the sky stays clear." "Cool," he replied, trying to sound casual but unable to hide his excitement. Eleanor departed with a warm smile, leaving us to our established Sunday routine. We baked chocolate chip cookies in the kitchen I had recently renovated, not because Philip had suggested it was too dated, but because I had always wanted a gas range and farmhouse sink. We played board games in the living room, where new, comfortable furniture had replaced the formal pieces I'd kept for decades out of habit rather than preference. We shared stories in the garden, where I was planning a small greenhouse, another long-deferred dream now taking shape. After lunch, I had something special to show them. "I have a project I'd like your opinions on," I announced, leading them to Harold's study, now transformed into my office. The heavy curtains and somber decor had been replaced with light colors and comfortable furniture. On the large monitor of my new computer was the homepage design for the Harold Gardner Foundation for Women's Financial Independence. "What is it?" Audrey asked, climbing onto my lap to see better. "It's a foundation, an organization I'm creating to help women, especially grandmothers like me, understand and manage their money so they can make their own decisions about their lives." "Like a bank?" Bryce asked, peering at the screen with interest. "Not exactly. More like a school that teaches people about money and also helps them if someone has been unfair with their finances." Bryce's expression grew thoughtful. "Like if someone takes their money without asking?" My heart tightened at his perception. Had he overheard conversations at home? Sometimes, yes. Or if someone tries to make them feel like they can't understand money matters because they're too old or not smart enough. "Dad says women aren't usually good with money," Bryce commented, repeating what he'd clearly heard elsewhere. "Except Mom. He says she's too good at spending it." I chose my words carefully, aware of the delicate balance between honesty and respect for his parents. Everyone can learn to be good with money, regardless of whether they're a man or a woman. That's what this foundation is about, making sure everyone has the knowledge and confidence to manage their own finances. As the children explored the website mock-up, offering surprisingly insightful suggestions about colors and images, I marveled at how naturally they accepted this new version of their grandmother, not just a cookie baker and gift giver, but a woman with purpose and agency. Later, as promised, we set up the telescope on the back patio. The early spring evening was chilly but clear, perfect for stargazing. I showed them how to adjust the focus, how to use the star chart to identify constellations, how to track the movement of celestial bodies. "Grandpa taught me about the stars when I was about your age," I told Bryce as he peered through the eyepiece with intense concentration. He said, "Understanding the vastness of the universe helps keep our earthly problems in perspective." "Do you still have problems?" Audrey asked, her small face serious in the twilight. "Mom says you and Dad had a big fight. She told Dad it was his fault for letting you find out about something." I gathered her close, choosing honesty wrapped in age-appropriate simplicity. "Your dad and I had a disagreement, yes. Adults sometimes make mistakes and hurt each other's feelings, even in families. But we're working through it. just like you and Bryce do when you argue. Sometimes healing relationships takes time and patience. Will you come to my birthday party next month? Bryce asked suddenly, still looking through the telescope rather than at me. It's at the house. Dad said I could invite you, but Mom didn't say anything. The invitation, casual but significant, caught me by surprise. I would love to come if you want me there. I do, he said simply, finally turning to look at me directly. You're my grandma. In those 3 words, you're my grandma, I heard the unconditional acceptance that only children can offer, untainted by adult complications. In Bryce's eyes, the situation was simple. Family belonged together, regardless of past hurts. After Eleanor picked up the children, I sat alone in my garden as dusk deepened into night, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The past months had brought pain and revelation, loss and recovery. I had confronted betrayal and found strength I hadn't known I possessed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the official launch of the foundation, the ongoing negotiations with Philip and Tiffany about family boundaries, the continuing journey of self-rediscovery. But tonight, under the same stars that had witnessed generations of human struggle and resilience, I felt something that had been absent for too long. Peace. Not the fragile peace of denial or the false peace of martyrdom, but the earned peace of a woman who had faced her truth and chosen her path forward with clear eyes and an open heart. We're going to be okay, I whispered to the night sky, to Harold's memory, to myself, all of us, in our own way. We're going to be okay. Christmas Eve, 1 year later. Snow fell in gentle, hypnotic swirls outside my bedroom window as I fastened the pearl earrings Harold had given me on our 25th anniversary. In the mirror, a woman I was still getting to know stared back at me, silver hair styled in an elegant bob, confident posture, eyes clear and direct where they had once been avoidant. The coral lipstick I'd reintroduced to my life added a touch of warmth to my complexion, a small but significant reclamation of the woman I had been before grief and manipulation had dimmed my spirit. Downstairs, my home awaited the evening's gathering, transformed, like its owner, into something both familiar and new. The formal furniture that had occupied the living room for decades, chosen more for appearance than comfort, had been replaced with elegant but inviting pieces. The dark wallpaper in the dining room had given way to warm, golden paint. Harold's study had become my office, though his photograph still held a place of honor on my desk, his kind eyes seeming to approve of the changes. The dining table was set with my grandmother's china, polished silver, and crystal glasses that caught the light from the newly installed chandelier. Center stage was the hand-carved wooden angel that had topped our Christmas tree throughout Philip's childhood, a tradition I had maintained even as other aspects of my life evolved. 1 year ago tonight, I had stood alone in the Denver airport, heart full of hope and arms laden with gifts, waiting for a reunion that would never come. The memory no longer stung with the same intensity. Dr. Schaefer had helped me understand that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant the wound was no longer the center of my existence. The doorbell rang at precisely 4 o'clock. I took a deep breath, straightened my festive red cashmere sweater, and moved to answer it, my heels clicking confidently on the hardwood floors I'd had refinished in the spring. Philip stood on the doorstep, snowflakes melting in his hair, Audrey and Bryce flanking him with excitement barely contained in their small bodies. Behind them, Tiffany waited, elegant in a camel coat, her expression carefully composed, but not hostile. "Merry Christmas, Mom," Philip said, leaning in to kiss my cheek, a gesture that had become easier over months of gradual reconnection. "Grandma!" Audrey launched herself at me with her characteristic enthusiasm, wrapping her arms around my waist. "We brought presents, and Dad says we can stay overnight and have breakfast with you tomorrow morning." Bryce, now 10 and increasingly aware of his dignity, offered a more restrained but equally warm hug. "I brought my new astronomy book to show you," he said, "and the telescope app I told you about." "Welcome, all of you," I said, stepping back to invite them in, making sure to include Tiffany in my smile. "I've been looking forward to this all week. The invitation had been Philip's idea, extended during one of our weekly coffees that had evolved from tense negotiations to something approaching companionship. "We'd like to spend Christmas Eve with you in Boston," he'd said, a hint of the boyish uncertainty I remembered from his youth crossing his face. "All of us, if you're willing." Tiffany had later added her own carefully worded note. "The children would love to experience Christmas in your home. We all would, if the offer of reconciliation is still open." It had taken effort on both our parts to reach this moment, a Christmas gathering that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Our relationship remained the most strained, built more on mutual respect for boundaries than genuine warmth. But for the sake of the children, and for Philip, who was genuinely trying to repair what had been broken, we maintained a civil detente that had gradually softened around the edges. As they moved through the foyer, exclaiming over the decorations, I caught Tiffany studying the framed photographs on my mantel, images documenting our journey over the past year. The children at the Boston Children's Museum, Bryce at his astronomy camp, Audrey winning a storytelling competition, and, prominently displayed, a recent photo of me receiving an award for the Harold Gardner Foundation's work. "Your foundation is doing remarkable work," she said, surprising me with what sounded like genuine admiration. "Philip showed me the feature in Boston Magazine." "Thank you," I replied, accepting this unexpected olive branch. "It's become more than I ever imagined." Indeed, the Harold Gardner Foundation for Women's Financial Independence had exceeded all expectations, growing from a personal mission into a respected organization with offices in 3 cities. We had provided financial literacy workshops to over 2,000 women in the first year alone. Catherine Bradley and I had been featured in several national publications, and we'd recently secured a significant grant to expand our services to rural communities. "Can we make the special cookies now?" Audrey interrupted, tugging at my hand. "The ones with the stars on top that you showed us last time?" The evening unfolded with surprising ease, not without moments of careful navigation around sensitive topics, but with genuine warmth that gradually relaxed even Tiffany's guarded demeanor. We prepared dinner together, the kitchen filled with the kind of casual conversation that ordinary families take for granted. After the meal, as the children arranged cookies for Santa, Philip joined me in the kitchen where I was preparing coffee. "I never properly thanked you," he said quietly, his voice low enough that it wouldn't carry to the living room where Tiffany was helping the children hang stockings. "For what?" "For giving me a chance to make amends, for not pressing charges when you had every right to, for maintaining my relationship with my children despite what I did." I measured coffee grounds carefully, giving myself time to find the right words. "I didn't do it just for you, Philip. I did it for myself too. Bitterness and revenge would have poisoned whatever years I have left. Still," he persisted, "many people would have chosen differently." "I'm not many people," I replied, with a small smile. "I'm your mother. That hasn't changed, even when everything else did." His eyes, so like Harold's, filled unexpectedly with tears. "The Foundation's retreat center at the lake house. That was genius, you know. Turning something that caused so much conflict into something that helps others. The lake house, the property that had sparked the first major rift with Philip and Tiffany 3 years ago, had been transformed into a retreat center for the Foundation, hosting workshops for women seeking financial independence while enjoying the natural beauty that had brought our family so much joy over the years. "It felt right," I said simply. The house deserved to be filled with purpose again. Later, after presents had been opened and carols sung, after Tiffany had surprised me with a thoughtful gift of artisanal teas, and I had presented her with a cashmere scarf in her favorite shade of blue, after the children had finally fallen asleep in the guest room that was now permanently theirs, I stood alone in my garden. Snow continued to fall softly, illuminated by the string lights I'd hung among the dormant rose bushes. In the quiet darkness, I reflected on the year's journey, from abandoned traveler to empowered woman, from manipulated mother to respected advocate, from silent victim to powerful voice. My relationship with Philip had evolved into something I could never have imagined during those dark days of discovery and confrontation. The repayment plan continued on schedule, But more importantly, our weekly conversations had gradually revealed a son genuinely working to understand his actions and their impact. Tiffany remained the most guarded, but even she had begun to thaw as she witnessed the positive changes in her husband and children. The couple had downsized to a more modest home in Denver, embracing financial counseling and more transparent communication. Lessons painfully learned, but potentially transformative. Most precious of all were my relationships with Bryce and Audrey. What began as tentative reconnection had blossomed into genuine bonds. They spent one weekend each month with me in Boston, and I had visited Denver twice, staying in a nearby hotel, but spending days filled with activities and conversation. The sound of the door opening behind me interrupted my reverie. Philip stepped into the garden, offering a steaming mug of the spiced cider he'd made earlier. "The kids are asleep," he said, joining me in contemplation of the snowy night. "Tiffany, too. She was nervous about today, you know, afraid of your judgment." "We all make mistakes, Philip," I replied, accepting the warm mug gratefully. "The measure is what we do afterward." We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the snow transform my garden into a winter wonderland. "I finally understand what Dad always said about second chances," Philip said quietly. "That they're not about erasing what happened, but about creating something new from what remains." As we turned to go inside, I caught sight of my reflection in the window, not just Philip's mother or Harold's widow, but Sylvia Gardner in her own right. Author, advocate, founder, grandmother, survivor. The circle that had begun in abandonment had completed itself in reconciliation, not by returning to what was, but by creating something new from the broken pieces of what had been. "Merry Christmas, Mom," Philip said, holding the door for me. "Merry Christmas, son," I replied, stepping back into the warmth of my home, my true home, reclaimed and renewed, like the woman who now owned it completely.